Welcome back to the Fluent Flow podcast, where we unlock the secrets to confident English speaking. I'm Maya, your host, and today we're pulling back the curtain on how to master podcast hosting in English. To help explore this, I'm joined by language coach Alex. Alex, why is hosting such a unique skill for language learners?
Thanks, Maya. Hosting requires not only strong language skills, but also the ability to guide a conversation, keep listeners engaged, and maintain a natural flow. Unlike casual chats, you have to think about structure and delivery constantly.
So hosting is really about balancing content and communication style. Before we dive into techniques, let's clarify what makes hosting different from simply being a guest on a show.
Great question. As a host, you're responsible for steering the discussion, introducing topics, and making guests comfortable. You also need to summarize points and transition smoothly, which demands a higher level of fluency.
Let's jump right into the first step, making a strong introduction. Alex, listeners often decide within seconds if they'll stick with a podcast. What elements create a compelling opener?
A professional greeting, a clear statement of the episode's focus, and a touch of personality are key. For example, "Thanks for tuning in to another episode," sets a welcoming tone, while sharing a brief story personalizes the experience.
So, in other words, the host role is to invite listeners in and give them a reason to stay. Can you provide an example of an effective opening line?
Absolutely. Something like, "Today we're diving into the secrets of fluent English podcasting," immediately tells listeners what to expect and establishes your expertise.
Now, once the show is underway, welcoming your guest is crucial. I often say, "It's a pleasure to have you here." Alex, why does this matter so much for fluent hosting?
Warm welcomes set the tone for the entire conversation. They help guests relax and encourage them to share openly. Studies in communication show that positive openings boost engagement by up to 40%.
That's a significant difference. In your experience, do certain phrases work better to put guests at ease, especially if you're both non-native English speakers?
Definitely. Phrases like, "Thanks for joining us today," or "We're excited to have your insights," create inclusivity and show genuine interest. It's about making guests feel valued from the start.
Let's shift gears and talk about transitions. One challenge for hosts is moving between topics naturally. Alex, what are some strategies to avoid awkward jumps?
Smooth transitions rely on connecting ideas with phrases like, "Speaking of that," or "That brings us to our next point." These markers act like bridges, guiding listeners effortlessly from one segment to another.
So, using these phrases is like providing signposts along the conversational road. Could you share a time when an effective transition turned around a stumbling interview?
Absolutely. During a live recording, I once used "on a related note" after a guest's long answer. It helped refocus the discussion and kept the energy up, preventing listeners from tuning out.
Just to circle back to what you mentioned, paraphrasing is vital. Alex, how does rephrasing a guest point enhance understanding for the audience?
When hosts paraphrase, they show active listening and help clarify complex ideas. For instance, saying, "So what you're saying is," allows the audience to process the information twice, increasing retention by up to 30%, according to language studies.
In other words, it's not just repetition, it's reinforcement. Can you provide an example of paraphrasing in action, especially when a guest uses technical jargon?
Sure. If a guest says, "This method streamlines workflow," the host might reply, "Let me rephrase that. It helps teams work more efficiently, right?" This checks understanding and simplifies the language for listeners.
Let me tell you a quick story about transitions. Early in my hosting days, I'd switch topics with no warning, and listeners got confused. Alex, why are stories so effective in podcast hosting?
Stories create emotional connections and make abstract concepts tangible. According to neuroscience research, storytelling activates more brain regions than simply stating facts, which boosts engagement and recall.
That's fascinating. So, integrating personal anecdotes isn't just entertaining, it's educational. How can hosts weave stories in without derailing the main discussion?
It's about relevance. Use stories to illustrate points, then tie them back with phrases like, "Here's why that matters to our topic today." That way, the narrative serves the learning goal.
So, to wrap up a segment, summarizing is key. Alex, what's the best way for hosts to consolidate information for their audience?
Effective summaries use phrases like, to put it simply, or, here's what we covered so far. This acts as a memory anchor, helping listeners retain main ideas and connect segments.
If I understand you correctly, summarizing isn't just about repetition, it's about highlighting essentials. Can you share an example of a concise recap after a complex discussion?
Certainly. After discussing transitions, a host might say, in short, using clear markers helps your podcast flow smoothly and keeps your audience engaged. It's about crystallizing takeaways.
Now, let's talk about engaging the audience. Advanced learners often ask how to keep listeners involved, even in solo episodes. What techniques work best here, Alex?
Interactive cues like rhetorical questions, direct challenges, or encouraging feedback make listeners feel part of the conversation. For example, have you ever struggled with transitions? Invite personnelle réflexion.
That's a great point. So, by prompting listeners to think or act, hosts transform passive listening into active learning. Are there risks of overusing these techniques?
Yes, overusing can break the flow or feel forced. The key is moderation and relevance. Space them out and make sure each prompt ties back to your episode's objectives.
Let's shift gears again and discuss delivery. Alex, pace and intonation are often overlooked. How do these vocal features affect podcast fluency and professionalism?
Pace controls clarity. Speaking too fast overwhelms, while too slow loses energy. Intonation signals emphasis and emotion. A varied tone keeps listeners alert and helps highlight key points, much like underlining in text.
So, adjusting vocal delivery is like using punctuation in writing it guides the audience. What practical exercises can hosts use to improve their pacing and intonation?
Recording practice segments and playing them back is highly effective. Also, reading scripts aloud with intentional pauses and pitch changes trains muscle memory for dynamic delivery.
As we approach the end, let's recap some practical steps. Alex, what exercises can advanced learners do to master fluent podcast hosting?
Try the Solo Host Challenge. Record a 2-minute intro, including a greeting, topic, transition, and personal story. Paraphrasing drills and transition practice also build confidence and flexibility.
In other words, structured practice mirrors real hosting demands. Would you recommend these techniques even for those aiming at public speaking or interviews, not just podcasting?
Absolutely. The same skill-smooth transitions, active listening, clear summaries translate directly to presentations, meetings, and media interactions. Fluent hosting is a toolkit for all advanced English users.